The deadly and cataclysmic COVID-19 pandemic, the first of its scale and impact since the 1918 Spanish flu, has shrunk global economies by 5.2 percentage points this year, which represents the deepest economic recession since the Second World War. No region in the world has been spared from the devastating socio-economic impact of this disease, and in Grenada, this impact would be laid bare in the Parliament as the island's newly minted Minister of Finance is expected to present an austerity budget to reflect the dire economic conditions that Grenada and other Caribbean countries now confront. Grenada's Prime Minister, Dr. Keith Mitchell, already alerted the population about the country's fiscal picture for fiscal year 2021 to 2022 at a town hall meeting in St. David.
That we had to cut some of the expenditure we normally do because the revenue has dropped. And that is, friends, that is life. And I want all people to understand this, because you get impression, although some people hear us saying revenue has dropped, you're getting more and more demand for more services and more services. Yes, people must ask, but understand also if the revenue has dropped, our expectation must drop to some extent.
Mitchell's frank assessment of the country's economic picture is also borne out by the country's shortfalls in revenue for fiscal year 2020, from almost 60 million EC dollars in 2019 to just under $53.7 million in 2020. The country also experienced a shortfall in international grant funding from friendly donor countries. This economic outlook is also analogous to the IMF's country report on Grenada, in which the organization predicted a precipitous contraction of negative 8% of the Grenadian economy at the end of the fiscal year, while predicting, however, that the island's GDP would grow by 6.1% in 2021. This morning on the Bubb Report, we preview the upcoming budget, a first to be presented by Honorable Gregory Bowen, the longest-serving Minister of Communications, Works and Public Utilities in Grenada. Also on the Bubb Report, we discuss issues affecting Grenada's main opposition political party, the National Democratic Congress, with its interim political leader, Adrian Thomas. The NDC was dealt an unexpected blow with the resignation of its first constitutionally elected female political leader, Franka Alexis Bernadine. The party, which has historically been beleaguered by palace intrigue, internal strife, and constant leadership change, says that it is strengthening its infrastructure to prepare for the upcoming general elections whenever it's called. It's Sunday, November 28th, 2020, and I welcome our guests, Adrian Thomas, Interim Political Leader of the NDC, Pethifer Lewis-Smith, Executive Director of the Grenada Chamber of Industry and Commerce, economist and former public servant Lennox Andrews, and Senator Christopher Diali, the private sector's representative in the upper house of the Grenada Parliament. Streaming from Washington, D.C., I am your host, Kellen Bubb. Thanks for joining us. A pleasant good morning to everyone, and welcome to yet another edition of the Bubb Report. Of course, it is the last Sunday in November, And it is a slightly cold morning here in Washington, D.C. Not as cold as is to be expected for this time of year, but certainly the temperature is manageable. I had the opportunity to get my early morning walk to enjoy this lovely fall weather that we're having here in DC. Certainly, I also want to take the opportunity to welcome our guests this morning, and I look forward to the packed show that we are about to have. But as a reminder to Grenadians who are here in the diaspora, this afternoon, the Minister of Health actually will be holding a public forum for our Grenadian nationals. It's an information session, in essence, to talk about the new Grenada travel certificate and COVID-19 protocol that is being put in place to address issues with respect to quarantine when Grenadians here in the diaspora do fly into Grenada, especially from places like New York and Miami. The event is being streamed from 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, which would be 4 p.m. in Grenada and 8 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time. It's going to be panel led by Health Minister Nicholas Steele, and it's being organized by the Office of Diaspora Affairs as well as with the Ministry of Health in Grenada. So those of you who are in the diaspora here and you are planning to go home for the holidays, you're planning to travel next year, this is a very important session. Hopefully it will clear up a lot of the opaque issues with respect to quarantine and the quarantine protocols when we do arrive in Grenada as returning nationals. And let me take this opportunity now to welcome my first guest. He is the interim political leader. He's become the interim political leader of the national
acting political leader.
He's correcting me from the get-go. Thank you for the correction, Mr. Thomas.
No problem.
You also like me from St. David's. You know, you're from Central St. David's. I'm from Pomrose. I'm very proud of that.
I'm living in Central St. David, but I grew up in Vincennes.
You grew up in Vincennes. Okay, you grew up in Vincennes. All right, very well. Okay, Mr. Thomas. Now, I don't know whether or not we should say congratulations are in order, because you are assuming the leadership of your party during a very difficult economic period in Grenada, but also at a moment when everything seems to be in flux with respect to the direction and visibility of your party. Would that be a fair characterization, Mr. Thomas?
Well, first of all, let me say good morning to you and your.
You need to switch your phone back. You're sideways.
Wow.
Yeah.
Somebody's coming.
You need to decline all calls right now. Tell them you're busy right now.
Definitely.
Yeah, but proceed, Mr. Thomas. Right. We seem to have lost Mr. Thomas there, but we are going to wait for Mr. Thomas to come back. And while we wait for him to come back, I was able to pull up a clip from a former political leader, actually one of the founding members of the NDC, and I thought that this would be a good time to play that clip. So let us take you back to 1986.
NDC is a force to be reckoned with, because in 7 months it grew out of a wish of thousands of young people and other people who have been disillusioned and alienated from NDC, and who do not consider the GLP a viable alternative for developing the country and responding to their wishes. That is the origin of the growth of the NDC. And the people told us so as we held public meetings, even before we even talked about having any organization. They said, whom do we speak about? What is your party? We cannot go around the place talking about a man. Which organization are we going to work for? Whom can we promote? And they said, look, you fellas, all of this meeting and talk is good, but we want an organization that we can identify with. And that is why we were virtually propelled in 7 months, together with our supporters around the country, front runners, to organize. And in October, we held our first and most successful national convention. at which there were 300 delegates and approximately 1,500 observers. Even members of the press who are not sympathetic to NDC had to say that they had to put in the finger that it was one of the best and most organized conventions we have witnessed in for the longest while. At the National Democratic Congress, I will tell you, is the most organized party today.
All right, folks, we're just standing by to reconnect with Mr. Thomas. He seemed to be having some connectivity issues. But we want to hear from you. We want to hear from our viewers and listeners. Would it be fair to say that the NDC is experiencing, these internecine issues that seem to not bode well for a political alternative in Grenada? I think Grenadians are clamoring for that kind of political alternative, and the NDC has had a share of leadership change over this period. So we really want to hear from you. As a matter of fact, let me play another clip, and that would be from young activist Nevaeh Newman, as well as Prime Minister Keith Mitchell. Of course, these two people have never been on the same page politically. They do not see eye to eye on anything. But one of the things that they see eye to eye on is the fact that the NDC is not a visible political organization. So I'll play that other clip.
Currently, the wind is not blowing in a green direction. But here's what it is not doing. It is not blowing in NDC's direction. You know why? Because NDC has a lot to do. NDC is too passive.
All right, Mr. Thomas, you seem to be back. You're back.
Yes, I'm back.
Yes.
Wow,
Okay,
it was a task. It was a
yes,
task.
it was. I'm giving you some work to do. All right, so
That's okay. I'm
right.
a worker.
Good. So, Mr. Thomas, back to my question. I was asking, the party seems to be in flux. Is that a fair characterization?
Well, like all our organizations throughout the world, we at some point in time, organizations go through those period. The thing about it is whether you are prepared to deal with it when it occurs. And one of the problems over the years we may have had in Grenada is people moving about from different political organizations, people going about and do different things in life. Other people have been affected, and really and truly, you have to deal with those things. In the National Democratic Congress, people tend to think that we do have a leadership problem. But let me make it abundantly clear here. We don't have a leadership problem in the NDC. We have a succession plan, and people for different reasons may decide to come into politics and get out of politics. And when that occurs, we deal with the matter as we address the matter as we have demonstrated in the past. We had Honorable George Brisson in the party as leader. We had Nicholas Prophet. We had Tillman Thomas. We had Nazim Buck. And every time one have to step down for various reasons, we step up to the plate and we give the people a leader. We do not have a headless organization. At the same time, I think it's very important that we demonstrate to the Grenadian people that nobody is indispensable. We can function where people get the chance to lead in our organization. We do not have to have one leader for life. I mean, in many countries, political leaders make 1 term, 2 terms, 3 terms, and they leave, and that's no big deal. Other people take the space. Sister Franka had a serious issue, and there is no way she could have ignored that. It was not surprising to us because she kept us in the loop. She kept us in terms of what was happening in her life, and we were quite aware. She discussed it with us, and the time has come for she to move on the advice of a doctor.
So,
And as deputy political
Thomas,
leader,
yeah, in
as
essence,
deputy
yes,
political leader, I
Yeah.
had to step in and take the leadership role.
So what you're saying is that this resignation was expected? Because you said she was keeping you guys in the loop as to what was
Well,
going
from the
on with
time
her.
she made the observation,
Uh-huh.
she was keeping us in the loop. We have to be
Okay.
honest with her. Yeah.
Okay.
It's not a matter. It's not a matter that we knew it for months ago. The medical field don't work like that. You get up
Mm-hmm.
a morning, you're not feeling well. You go by the doctor. You're surprised to know what's wrong with you.
Mm-hmm.
And from there onwards, we were kept in the loop.
Okay, now, Mr. Thomas, I have another question. Your party has been viewed as bacchanalian at best, right? There always seem to be some kind of internecine internal conflict and strife. Of course, there were fine public servants who led your party, such as the late Nicholas Brathwaite, the late George Brizan, even Franka Alexis Bernadine served as a public servant. Tillman Thomas, also public servant, and Nazim Burke. There always seemed to be some conflict in the party, even when the party formed the government in 2008. Now, what would you attribute to these issues, and how do you plan on ameliorating those concerns that people have, at least the perception that your party is laden with conflict?
Well, I don't think it's a fair statement to say our party is laden with conflict. We have a very united force. What there are situations when we had conflict and people resolve it, like all other political parties. And you're taking it from Uncle Gary come right up. Ministers came in, ministers left, ministers got fired. We have the new National Party, where the leader was changed. Some went with Dr. the Right Honorable Kit Mitchell, others went with Blaze. TNP was formed. All those. However, it seems as though the National Democratic Congress has there's a different benchmark for this organization, because things that happened, the last maybe conflict we had was in 2012, somewhere around there, 2010, 2012. However, since then we have been a united force, and people tend to, some of the people that are pushing this, they tend to tag this onto us. We had a very smooth transition when Brother Buck left. We had a smoother transition when Anda left, and we even had a better transition when Sister Franka left. So we are demonstrating that we are united, and we are ready to take Grenada politics forward.
Okay, Mr. Thomas, before you got back, I was actually playing two clips for you to listen to. One from a youth activist and the other from the Prime Minister and your political rival, Dr. Keith Mitchell, who incidentally is perhaps one of the longest serving politicians in Grenada and the Caribbean. Both individuals don't seem to agree on anything, Mr. Thomas, except on one area, and that is the lack of visibility of your party. I want to play this clip, and I will give you the opportunity to respond.
Sure.
Currently, the wind is not blowing in a green direction. But here's what it is not doing. It is not blowing in NDC's direction. You know why? Because NDC has a lot to do. NDC is too passive, too silent. Listen, people want an alternative. And NDC, you are the alternative. But you have to pull up your socks, pull up your pants too, tie your shoelace and put on your belt. This is serious times. So you all can't just sit idly by. Or there are some who may be doing a thing or two. There are some who probably working behind the scenes, but people need to hear you now, because people are right now the mentality is set up whereby people are saying, nah, I'm fed up with NNP. I'm done with them. This man has been in power for too long. We need a change. But then they're asking, a change? Where is the change?
Tell me something. Have you seen the face of an opposition person in this hard time? Tell me something. Where is the opposition? No, seriously, where is the opposition to the government? They hide in, but election time, they're coming out. They're coming out. My friends, I'm making a point. This is hard times. If you care about people, come and help. Come and help. You never know. But all they're doing is standing there criticizing everything the government does. They're not offering one constructive criticism to offer help to improve the lot of the people.
Mr. Thomas, what did Mr. You're laughing, but I mean this is
Yes, I have.
yeah, but
No, because the irony of
but
the irony of the thing is that I've listened to Dr. Mitchell, and in the same breath, in the same presentation, he's saying that he's not hearing, nobody's seen the NDC. However, he said that all we are doing is coming out and criticize. I don't know how we got that information in regards to we coming out and criticize. It means that he's hearing us and he's listening. Dr. Mitchell is known for trying to create the narrative in Grenada politics. The National Democratic Congress, we had a caregivers initiative program during the COVID period. We gave out over 5 to 600 food hampers. We gave out water boots to the farmers. We had a number of young ladies and even the political leader coming and making masks for distribution, and we did that. Now the media highlighted that, so a lot of people knew what we were doing. Even to the extent that the Ministry of Education knew what we were doing when they stopped the food giving program in some of the schools. I had to stay in the school gate when the principal said to us that we cannot come down to the school to deliver the lunches. I personally stayed in St. David's Catholic Secondary School gate, and the children came up and they collected the lunch. So it was something that the National Democratic Congress was doing. They came up with the initiative, and here we had the authority trying to come up with some petty excuse and say that we didn't get permission. Well, we got permission from every single principal that we asked to deliver the lunches in the various schools, and that was a fact.
So where is that perception coming from? Is it an issue then?
Well,
that
no. Well,
you
I
are
was
doing
about
the
to
work,
address,
but that there are issues with public relations. Well, what is it?
Well, I don't want to miss the clip you had on the young lady.
Yes.
With the young lady, I want to address that also. But at the same time, we have embarked, and I promised the media, MWAG, that I will be having a serious discussion with them. I will be engaging them in going forward, and we have to be part. I beg them to be part and parcel of the whole structure in terms of going forward. The media have a critical role to play. We as politicians, as the main opposition party in Grenada, have a very important role to play. And we will be. There are a lot of information we put out. We had interviews for maybe 1 hour or an hour and a half. And sometimes some radio stations we don't even make the news. They leave the news after you have a press conference. So we have to improve that relationship with the media houses in Grenada, and we will be happy to work with them so that we can feed the Grenadian people with the news that they get in.
But you're saying media houses working with media houses. Certainly,
yes.
There are other platforms
well, of course,
which people
yes.
acquire information. So
Well,
what does your information ecosystem look like, apart from relying on the media to publish your messages?
Yes. We have a website also. We do have a Facebook page. Nothing happening in the party without publishing it on the social media. We are in a number of chats. Quite a few people of our supporters express the views of the National Democratic Congress. So social media, I don't think we have shortage on this. What I think though is that some people want us to maybe respond to quite a few pertinent issues, and they did not get a response from us. So they are asking for a response. Now, as a political organization and a responsible organization, you want to be careful in terms of what comes from the leadership of the party. And therefore, we every single issue in Grenada, we discuss it, and we publish our statements. However, we have to listen to the people, and I think what the young lady is saying there, we're going to pay particular attention to that. We're going to we are a party that really and truly listen to the voice of the people, and we say let the people's voices be heard, and we will be paying particular attention to her. I don't think that I can fault her for saying what if she's not feeling, she's not feeling. So it is our responsibility to come out and make the people feel the presence of the National Democratic Congress.
Now, Mr. Thomas, when are elections? Of course, you're going to have a leadership election. When is your convention expected to be held?
Well, we are planning to have the General Council meeting in the first quarter of 2021, and that meeting will determine a date for the convention where we will have an election for a political leader.
The first quarter
and
of
other offices.
2021, assuming that the Prime Minister calls the election in the first quarter of 2021, would your party be ready to contest the election?
Well, let me put it this way: we didn't arrive here just yesterday. We have been we are a noble institution in Grenada, and we have structures in place. We are engaging a number of people in the various constituencies. We have already assigned caretakers to many of the constituencies. We still have a few. We are talking to people. We are engaging people. As a matter of fact, we have in some constituency we have 3 and 4 people talking to, because people want to be part of the struggle. They want to make a contribution. So the Prime Minister, it's in his hands, and whenever he calls the election, the National Democratic Congress will be ready.
Okay. Now, what about your future with respect to the leadership of the party? Do you intend to contest the leadership of the party at the convention?
Well, put it this way, Bob. I have never ever, and I will never, impose myself on people. I always wait for the call, and when the call comes, I will definitely respond in the affirmative, in the interest of the people, in the interest of my country. I am, at this point in time, I offered myself for the deputy political leader, and therefore I was prepared for anything happens to fall in line. And if I'm offering myself for the deputy and the political leader had to resign, and I turned down the responsibility of taking up the leadership, it will be very irresponsible of me. So I stepped up. And my performance, I am acting for now as political leader. And if my performance is taken seriously by the membership of the party, and they have confidence in me, and they trust me, and they think that I can take the party forward, I will respond in the affirmative.
What are you doing to attract young blood, new enthusiasm into the party? What's that looking like?
Bob, there are two. When Sister Franka resigned, 24 hours after, I asked the youth committee to have a meeting with them. I also requested a meeting from our rapid response team within the 24 hours. Those 2 meetings took place, and I have instructed both organizations. I've said to them that they have a level of autonomy, and they are much mature people. They know the principles of the party. They know where the party wants to go. Work in the interest of the party and the Grenadian people, and they are already engaging young people in terms of coming into the party.
But of course, you can understand that in this period, there are perceptions that if you associate yourself with an opposition party, certainly that is not unique to Grenada, that you would be branded. Would you say that that is a concern that you have, where people want to get involved in your party, but there is a fear that they would be victimized? Is that a fair assessment?
Well, I mean, I've never ever witnessed my whole life in Grenada. From the time I was in St. David's Catholic Secondary School, president of the student, vice president of the student council, president of the Vanguard. I was the chairman of the debating committee. So I've been involved in all those things, and I've been involved in politics and following Grenada politics. And that level of fear in Grenada has become part of the present administration. They have institutionalized it. And this is a concern not only for my political organization, but for the nation. There are people who I had very good relationship as a public servant with, and sometimes you see them today and you hail them up with all enthusiasm, and they give you a little bite. And it's not because they do not want to interact or be associated with Persuader, but that fear that is present in Grenada, we have to get rid of it. It is real. Victimization is real in Grenada. Vindictiveness is real. And if we don't address this as a nation, our country would not be going forward. So I am concerned about it. But the time will come, and it's slowly creeping in. It's slowly creeping in that Grenadians are realizing if ever our country have to go forward, they have to stand up. And people are speaking out more. People are making this observation in regards to the level of fear that exists, and especially among the young people. There's a gentleman I asked to head a committee in my constituency, and he's concerned about he's concerned about his daughter is in the public service. He's also concerned about his wife employed with an activist of the NNP. And we cannot live in a society like that. When we had the revolution in Grenada, people was demonstrating in some quarters, even in Washington, D.C., in front of the U.S. Embassy, calling for a multi-party system. They do not want a one-party state in Grenada. Today, there are people advocating for a one-party state. And we have a democratic structure.
Who are those people advocating for a one-party state?
Dismantle.
You said people are advocating.
Yes.
Who are those people?
Yes, there are some people in our society who is advocating for a one-party state.
I've never heard this. This is news to me.
Well,
Mr. Thomas,
I will furnish you with some clips.
all right.
I promise.
Definitely. I look forward to that, Mr. Thomas.
I will.
Let me just get to some quick comments before we get to the next segment. Jose Ernesto says, I think NDC needs to start having town hall meetings in the different parishes to meet and grow community support for the new NDC. Camille Tompkins says, as a youth, I've never seen the NDC done anything to get me to come on board with them. There was one election when the NDC manifesto was amazing, but instead of vocalizing it, they chose to keep bashing Keith and NNP. Then we have another comment here. Cassandra Mitchell says, unless the issues in the Parliamentary Elections Office are addressed, it doesn't matter what the NDC does, they lose. The Parliamentary Elections Office is one of the cores of democracy. And a side note here, the Parliamentary Elections Office reform issue is something that we are following here on the Bubb Report, and we will be having the supervisor of elections, another man from St. David's, Mr. Elvis Moraine, to come on the Bubb Report, in addition to civil society, and perhaps representative from the NDC as well, to come back and discuss those concerns. Let's get to some other comments. Lincoln Depredine says, I don't know about that, Tomo. I guess he's referring to your media comment. This idea that the media is a stakeholder with anybody, government, opposition, tourism, agriculture, etc., is a misplaced one. A journalist or media house's primary function is to report, commentate as they see it. One may choose to be a stakeholder, but there is no obligation on the part of a journalist or media house. Now, Mr. Depredine, you make a very good point, but as a media worker myself, there are concerns with respect to the independence or lack thereof of journalists in Grenada, and the jury is out on that as well. Dana Harford says, that is a bottleneck faced by the NDC and any oppositional movement, as a matter of fact. Breaking the emotional and psychological chains that Keith Mitchell and NNP have tied around the minds of Grenadians. It is an addictive dynamic that sadly would only take an equal to break. There is a lot of comments coming in, Mr. Thomas, but I definitely want to give you this opportunity to wrap up as we go to the next segment.
Well, I really thank you for having me on this program. It's a pleasure being here. I'm looking forward to come again, and I want to assure the Grenadian people that the National Democratic Congress is in order. Our vehicle is in motion. There are some important projects that Sister Franka has started, and definitely we will do everything possible to complete them. And the National Democratic Congress, look out! We are coming. We will be in your presence, and we are asking the media houses again to report. Give us a fair chance on the field, and report our whatever we put out, as they will do to anybody else. Once again, thank you, Kellen, for having me on your program.
Mr. Thomas, thank you. Listeners and viewers, stand by. We will be right back.
cut in salaries of ministers of government. Mr. Speaker, as a demonstration of our commitment to lead the cost-cutting effort by example, the Prime Minister and all ministers of government will take a 5% cut in their salaries from April 2012. This, Mr. Speaker, is indeed a sacrifice for ministers. However, sacrifices are needed at all levels of our society at this difficult time. I did not hear it myself, but I was told that the shadow member for finance on the opposition side was on radio and television yesterday saying that we understand we're taking a cut in salaries, but that we are planning to increase our allowances. I just want to say to him, Mr. Speaker, this is not a case of giving with the right hand and taking with the left. This is an NDC administration.
Welcome back, folks. We just heard from the current Prime Minister, former Minister of Finance at the 2020 budget debate. It was a budget filled with great expectancy and great optimism, and then COVID-19 happened. And before that, we heard from the former Minister of Finance, the Honorable Nazim Burke, and that was at the 2012 budget debate at the former Parliament building at the Grenada Trade Center. Certainly, budgets have their own theatrics, but it is a serious process, and we want to get to this discussion this morning. We were supposed to be joined by Ms. Pethifer Lewis-Smith. We did invite the Grenada Chamber of Industry and Commerce and Mr. Lennox Andrew, who was with us, but I don't know what happened. He's not here. But let me welcome Mr. Christopher Diali, who is the private sector representative in the Upper House of Parliament. Mr. Diali, good morning to you.
Good morning, Karen, and good morning to all your viewers and listeners.
Okay, Mr. Diali. Now, this budget, would you agree that the 2021 Grenada budget would be an austerity budget? Would that be a fair characterization to make?
I would suspect as much. It is also going to be a very difficult budget for any government to present in light of the COVID uncertainties as it relates to the macroeconomics of every economy. When you look at budgets that have been presented around the region in CARICOM, all of them are leaning towards that area of austerity because the main revenue streams are not what is expected because of the downturn in economies, both regionally and internationally. And we could chime in on the various sectors that are affected, and we could look at two in Grenada's context, which is tourism, cruise tourism, stay-over arrival tourism, as well as services, this year being particularly education services.
Mm-hmm. Now, Mr. Diali, there are some who posit that the government of Grenada, as a policy prescription, focused too heavily on tourism. And as a result of this heavy focus on tourism, that we are seeing this particular ripple effect here. Would that be a fair assessment?
I would suspect yes. All the economies of, particularly the OECS. Let's zoom in on the OECS. All of us have similarly structured economies from a macroeconomic level. We all depend on tourism, whether it's through, as I say, stay-over arrivals or cruise. Remittances is a high volume of cash inflow into the economy from our diasporas, and of course, agriculture. You have construction and so on. So the sectors that the governments depend on for revenue generation and productivity are all very similar. Grenada is no different. But if you look at it carefully throughout the region, Grenada is probably the most diversified, and that is because yes, we depend on tourism heavily because of its trickle-down effect. But when you look at education services, it represents a high portion of our GDP.
When you say education services, can you unpack that, please?
That is primarily SGU.
Okay.
So when we talk education services here, and that is a major player in the the GDP. Some people represent that it's as much as 25% of our GDP. So it is significant. So I say that to say, yes, we are dependent on tourism, but Grenada probably in the OECS is probably one of the more diversified economies from a macro level.
Now, Mr. Diallo, in reading the IMF country report from the first quarter of 2020, they predicted a significant constriction of tax revenues for this fiscal year, which is congruent with what the government has also indicated, that there is a significant shortfall in revenue. Given that the government failed to meet these revenue collection targets for the fiscal year, what areas do you foresee as being cut in the 2021 budget?
Well, I would presume that some of the social programs would be looked at, if not to cut, but to get them more efficient. That is one. I mean, we have huge social programs. We could cite Imani as one of them, and some of the others. But I mean, our vulnerable people, most of these IMF reports would say try as best as possible to protect it. And I suspect one of the ways they'll have to go to deal with that, if not cutting, but trimming some sorts of the program, but to get them more efficient. We have a lot of leakage in some of these programs. So that is probably one area. I suspect the areas of concessions and concession reliefs will also be streamlined and cut back. Cost efficiencies within government is always a room for improvement there. So on the cost side of the equation, there's probably a number of areas that government would look to tighten and reduce where they can, and without affecting people. But I know the philosophy going forward is going to be, keep people employed as much as possible. I don't think there will be any major retrenchment either on the public service or otherwise, because that doesn't help the situation in terms of economic activity and keeping people employed. And you know what happens with COVID, as our unemployment rate jumped back up because of the closure of a number of small and medium enterprises, as well as the tourism sector to a large degree, which employed a significant amount of people. And of course, the trickle-down effect, because without SGU and without tourism, a lot of businesses in the rental, the accommodation sector, food and beverage, entertainment have been significantly affected and had to either cut pay or send home staff. So it is significant from that point of view. So government, I don't think, would be looking to retrench and make major moves there, because I see that as not helping in terms of the economic activity and keeping economic activity bubbling to a certain degree.
Well, let me welcome Mr. Lennox Andrews. Mr. Andrews, welcome back. Yeah. I know that we have internet connectivity issues, and that is something that we have to make provision for here on the Bubb Report. But Mr. Andrews, you've been a public servant for many years. You worked with the Ministry of Finance. Certainly, this is a busy period for the bureaucrats there at the ministry. Just take us into the war room, if you will, of what budget preparations look like at the ministry at this time.
Well, it would have started a very long time ago, actually, with a call being sent out to the different ministries to get them ready to prepare their budget. There will be a sense of the expenditure limits that each ministry will be required to meet. And the respective budget officers in the different ministries would be charged with the responsibility of preparing a first draft of the budget, and all of which would be sent to the budget officer in the Ministry of Finance, who will put all together and prepare a draft for the consideration of the decision makers. So it is a very iterative process, because as you go preparing the budget, there will be constant changes. Yeah, and it's easier now because everything is computerized. In my early days, we had to work with paper and pen and calculators. So it becomes easier now to go on the system and make any change to the numbers. Good. So essentially, the whole ministry, as well as not just the ministry, but all the personnel in the ministry will be very busy during the preparation time trying to ensure that the numbers are what they were really looking for. And then there will be the discussion at the cabinet level. There will be discussion at the finance committee level meeting. One of the things that has to happen is that a first draft of the budget has to be shared with the official opposition for discussion. And of course, in that meeting, you have to explain, right? And as EPS, your job is to explain why, or put it that way, answer any question that comes up. Good.
Right. Okay. Now, let me get to another issue in the IMF report. Now, I as an academic, as a scholar, I enjoy reading these reports when they come out. But one of the points that the IMF report made, and I'm going to get both of you, Mr. Andrews and Mr. Diallo, to respond, and it really stood out. It made mention of the recent judgment in favor of the Grenada Electricity Services Company Limited, Grenlec. Quoting from page 6 of the report, it says, the fiscal financing outlook of Grenada could significantly deteriorate should a recent judgment over government dispute with Grenlec result in a significant outflow of liquidity. The judgment requires that the government pay $71.5 million US, or 6% of GDP, for a 50% stake in the company. In context, and again, this is quoting from the report. It's saying that whether or not they are concerned whether or not the government would actually be able to meet that commitment given its other debt obligations. So I would get Mr. Diallo to respond first, and I'll get back to Mr. Andrews.
Well, I certainly share the view that such a huge payout in funds can affect the government's liquidity position significantly, without a doubt. But as in everything else, once a judgment is called onto the party, they have to find and negotiate a way to pay the person who has won the judgment. And I suspect it don't have to all be in one bullet payment, and that is where the negotiation comes in. The government could sit with Grenlec and negotiate probably a payment plan of this monies as awarded by the judgment, and that will help reduce the one shot effect on probably liquidity of the government. So yes, it has to be dealt with, and yes, it has to be paid, but I suspect some negotiations can take place between the parties to at least get both sides to understand, yes, I'm going to pay you money, but I can't do all in one go. So let us see how we could talk about a payment plan. And of course, if that can't work, then they have to go back to the court and ask the court to intervene to see how they can work on this matter.
Mr. Andrews?
This has to go with the whole issue of responsibility and fiscal responsibility. When you are in government, what you do when people are elected to represent, you have to ensure that no unnecessary burden is being brought to bear on the population. Yeah. Now, I'm just wondering whether or not, in the first instance, a payment of this kind could have been avoided, and why steps were not being taken to avoid having to make a payment of this kind in the first instance. But be that as it may, the payment has to be made. It will seriously affect government fiscal performance, especially in a time like these of extreme falling revenues, of low GDP growth rate, of falling external grants. Yeah. In the negotiation, I would strongly suggest that, of course, the government sit with Grenlec and really try and put together a negotiation in the best interest of the population. Because if that does not happen, yeah, we end up with a serious fiscal crunch, fiscal fraud. If Grenlec were to put pressure on the government for the payment, yeah, then it would mean that from a recurrent point of view, government would not be able to meet some of its basic recurrent expenditure. Yeah.
But we're not only talking about recurrent expenditure, but we're also talking about other debt servicing as well, right?
Well, if you want, you can consider this to be a debt, right? In fact, treat it as a debt. If you treat it as a debt, then it would mean that the debt stock of the country would have increased, and the debt servicing of their, of course, would have increased. And that is, of course, added pressure on the fiscal situation, on the revenue situation of the government. I mean, my strong hope in the best interest of our country, because I'm a Grenadian, yeah, my strong hope is that a serious negotiation takes place with Grenlec, yeah, as regards a payment plan that would not lead to any major disruptions, yeah, in the economy and in the fiscal situation of the country.
All right, now let's go to construction. The government of Grenada has placed heavy emphasis on construction. Of course, it would be a spin-off from the heavy investments we're seeing in the tourism industry. Would it be fair to say that the construction sector, as it stands right now, is what is essentially keeping the economy buoyed, if you will, at this point? Mr. Diali?
Well, yes. In any crisis that you have economically, and we can term COVID as a crisis economically, governments and central governments look to short-term measures to give economic boost and to create economic activity. Construction is normally one of those sectors that they look to. So governments will have a heavy PSIP program, a public sector investment program, and they will look to private sector projects that can boost that as well. Of course, the risk you run here is that construction is very short term, short to medium. So you're looking at a window of 3 years, because some projects have a 3-year cycle. Very few have a 5-year cycle. So you have to mix that construction with a number of other areas of investment in the economy that is what we term productive sectors, so that there's sustainability in terms of the economic activity and the creation and generation of employment and so on. So yes, that is going to be one of the things I suspect the government is going to do: invest heavily in a PSIP program to create the kind of short-term employment and economic activity that you see. And that is probably a normal thing generally when governments go through these kind of economic crises and and their response to it.
Mr. Andrews?
Well, I think at any moment in time, given the objective economic situation facing the country, what has to happen is that we have to decide on what is the best economic policy, what is the best fiscal policy you can implement to effect change in the economy, given that objective situation. And given our present objective situation in Grenada right now, with COVID, the beauty, in my opinion, of COVID is that it has pointed to us what particular sectors we should address going forward. Yeah. Now, COVID is going to be around for a while, and there's no doubt about that. And for you to have some form of economic recovery, in the first instance, you have to address COVID, the COVID problem. Now, COVID is an imported problem. COVID don't exist in Grenada. It is imported. Good? And therefore, to bring the economy back to normal, you must find a way to address this COVID issue. Our borders have to be strengthened. Yeah? Our quarantine mechanisms have to be strengthened. And the point is that as long as the threat of COVID remains real, then we would not be able to attend to the economy as we should. And therefore, what I think should happen in the first place is that a lot of emphasis should be placed on strengthening our borders, strengthening the mechanisms for the quarantine, and making sure that whosoever comes in the country is free from that disease, from that sickness. Good? Once we can do that, then we can address the economic sectors that can lead to growth, that can lead to some form of stability in the country. So in my opinion, what I'm saying is that while you may want to focus on construction, yeah, in the first instance, I think you should address how we strengthen our borders, make sure that we are free, right, from this disease, so that the people can become free inside, because the disease is not inside, it is outside, it is imported, right? Address our borders, make sure that we are safe inside. And once we are safe inside, we can now address how we stabilize our economy and put mechanisms in place for our economy to grow.
And let us turn to, and then we will take a break, come up for air, and then we will turn to a discussion on the CBI program, other revenue earning measures that the government has put in place over the over this period of its administration, certainly. But I want to turn to this revenue shortfall, right, and the impact of that revenue shortfall. What, Mr. Diali, from a private sector lens, what is that revenue shortfall looking like for the private sector?
Well, for us, it has been a major challenge. I mean, a number of our businesses have seen significant drop off in revenues and sales. Some of us have had to shut because of that situation, and none of us in the sector have ever experienced this pandemic and what a pandemic entails. You know, when a lot of us prepare our policies as it relates to dealing with serious issues like, say, hurricanes and effects of hurricanes or earthquakes and so on. None of us had pandemics involved in some of these policies. So it is very new for us in the business community. And then what is even more new is the whole aspect of how social behavior has to change, both within the workplace and outside of the workplace, to address this particular pandemic and this particular virus and disease. And with that comes costs, with that comes rethinking of what you do and how you do it, and even rethinking of once you reduce personal contact to contact with people, then you talk about investment in a digital platform to do sales, as many of us in small and medium business have been able to do.
Mm-hmm.
But with all of that, I think every crisis creates an opportunity as well. So some of us needs to look inwards and see where and what COVID has done in relation to pointing out inefficiencies in how we operate and how we could save costs, and also looking at various other modes that you can involve your business in and streamline your business in other areas where you can exist now differently, but still remain productive and still remain profitable. So it is a challenge. And for those of us who are maneuvering and going through and mediating through all these lines, it has become difficult for us. And you could well imagine for small and micro businesses who do not have the capacity from an HR point of view and a consultancy point of view to make the changes and to deal with this, it has become very, very difficult. And as a result, some of them have had to shut their doors. Hopefully not permanently, but there are going to be those that are going to be permanently shut. I mean, economists like my friend Lennox will argue that if your business can't survive the test of a major issue, then probably shouldn't be there in the first case. And there are those arguments as well. But I think in the end, it's difficult. 2021 is going to represent another year of uncertainty for us. And what comes with that? A lot of us have finished our budgets for 2021 in the private sector. But I can tell you, it is going to be nothing close to what we had. Most of us are looking back at 2019 as a kind of base year and to see if we could come anywhere close to 2019 based on the changes and the modifications we have to make in our businesses.
Mm-hmm. Let's get to some comments here. Let's see. Leo Edwards says COVID-19 requires a multi-pronged approach to manage and to support the Grenadian people. Kamal Shahada says food self-sufficiency is the most important sector and have to be given priority and support. And this goes to the debate with respect to emphasis and investment in agriculture. That has been a long-running debate in the country. Ruel Edwards says, is it just greater investment in projects through a public sector investment program, or should there be greater efforts on the implementation side, since the PSIP already has undisbursed funds close to 0.05 billion? Tessa says strengthen the health sector too. Let's get to some other comments here. Let's see here. The government should push back the work on the airport. There is no emergency in this uncertain times. Now, why can't we use the money in more substantial areas to help the citizens of the country, like health, agriculture, manufacturing? These things can also create some employment for people. Some very interesting comments coming down the pike. But gentlemen, I want you to stay with me. We will take a break and we will be right back.
This region receives almost 16 billion US dollars in remittances, and these inflows provide a very important buffer to economic shocks to the most vulnerable. It helps to smooth consumption, not just for the most vulnerable, but especially for the most vulnerable. But it also provides support for small and medium enterprises. A lot of small businesses get started up based on capital from friends and family abroad. And when you have the kind of shock to the economies in the markets, so the next slide is showing us what the source markets are for our remittances. When we have shocks to those economies simultaneously, which, I mean, we really haven't seen that level of shock for 100 years, but I mean, even in the global financial crisis, we did see some shock to these economies simultaneously. And, you know, it means that you're going to see unemployment in those markets. And that unemployment is likely to drive a decline in the level of remittances that flow to these countries in the region. And
gentlemen, welcome back. As you saw in that, the economist is talking about our heavy reliance on remittances. Certainly, remittances is much more crucial during this period. Would you agree?
Of course, remittances have always been an important element of our survival, for our economy. Yeah, but the point is that you cannot. You see, what has COVID done, in my view, is that COVID has brought in a new sense of nationalism, a new sense of patriotism, a new sense of looking inwards to find solution to your problem. Right now, COVID is different from Ivan, because in Ivan, you could have called on a friend from outside to help you. But now you can't do that because we are all affected. So we have to look towards inward, towards ourselves, towards our resources, what we can do to help ourselves, right? And as long as it continues, the issue of feeding ourselves becomes extremely important. The issue of food security becomes extremely important. And therefore, what I would have liked to see, and my expectation from this budget, would be a heavy focus on domestic production for domestic consumption. That does not exclude you getting involved in your area of competitive advantage. But COVID is also saying to us that even while you focus on your competitive advantage, you must simultaneously be able to feed yourself, because it will require a certain amount of no trade, put it that way, for a while, before you could survive.
But Mr. Andrews, I'm sure the government of Grenada would disagree with you there, with your suggestion, because in the 2020 budget, and citing from the document, the Prime Minister said, with support, actually, let's go to the second paragraph. He says, as we push production, we also have to push agricultural competitiveness. Through the OECS Regional Agricultural Competitive Project, government will support a minimum of 10 private sector investments in agriculture. So here you are, you have a public-private partnership with agriculture, and the budget document further says that government will provide grant financing of 3.8 million towards the execution of these investments. Additionally, another $500,000 will be spent to improve the capacity of extension personnel through training and the provision of equipment. Finally, on page 28, it says there has been an increase in the administrative budget for the Ministry of Agriculture by $1.9 million from 16.7 in 2019 to 18.6 in 2020. So there has been some investments in agriculture. Mr. Andrews?
No, well, lucky you. I mean, you are privy to the budget speech.
No.
To
That was the
document.
2020 budget document, not the 2021 budget document, sir.
Ah.
No one has previewed the document.
Oh, you're referring to 2020.
I am not that privileged, yes.
All right. No, but it has become more critical more than ever in this time. It has certainly become more, and therefore, what I would hope to see is that there will be a continuation of that heavy investment in the agricultural sector, aimed at increasing our domestic food production, our food security for our domestic consumption in the first place, and therefore that can allow for some kind of export to take place at some point in time. So that is fine. I also wanted to speak on the issue of government revenue and how to treat with that foreign government revenue at this time.
Probably I can make one comment before Lennox goes on the agriculture.
Chris, go ahead.
I fully support Lennox's view on the whole issue of remittances. And of course, remittances issues is not only dependent on us, is solely what is happening in the more advanced economies such as the US and England and so on, and they battle with COVID. And that will significantly affect that. But on the feed yourself issue of food security, I support that. And I know these initiatives in the 2020 budget was announced. I think the issue with a lot of them may not have come off because of the issue of COVID. And when it struck, and in March, very early at the end of the first quarter, we were hit with COVID and we had to implement all those measures that we took. But on the involvement, and I always believe that production planning and execution of production is a critical aspect of it, extension of course, but we need to blend technology with agriculture. We are way behind in terms of the application of technology to agriculture. I mean, I talk about a simple thing as shade houses that can seriously help with our production and protect farmers in terms of disease control and weather conditions. And we don't have enough of that in a large scale as we ought to. And of course, private sector involvement, because if we could get partnerships with private sector companies, the private sector companies bring their experience in marketing and working capital, that can help mitigate the risks in agriculture. And we cannot get away from that. When you look at the percentage of financing that's done by the financial institution and the financial sector in agriculture, it borders around 2 to 5%. And the financial sector will tell you that the reason for that is that they don't get projects that come to them that are viable and have the appetite of risk mitigation that will facilitate that. So that is a major problem, and that's an issue that the government has to tackle. And I hear Lennox on more emphasis, and I think part of the emphasis has to be how do we incentivize the private sector and financial institutions to take risk in agriculture, or do we do it through a developmental bank type of financing, that type of model, and see how it can work. But we seriously need to do that. And we also need to bring our farmers up to the stage of understanding that agriculture is a big business. It's not small business. And we have to get rid of that psychological aspect of it as well. So that would be my few comments on that.
Let us turn to citizenship by investment. Earlier, Mr. Dialli, Lennox, did you want to respond?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah. I want to say something too, because perhaps I left out an important point, because agriculture is extremely important for us, for any economy. Now, agriculture must be seen and is considered to be as the most risky of all economic activity. It is the most risky. And maybe that's one of the reasons why it may be so difficult to submit a project to a financial institution for financing. A bank may very rarely want to finance a project in agriculture because of its high risk nature. But the theory is that for agriculture to be successful, two things must happen. One, prices must be sticky upwards. And so that will encourage farmers to go and produce, right? Prices have to be sticky, prices must be more or less fixed, and they must be high. And then secondly, there must be a secure market for the product. So farmers must know that when they produce, the products can be sold and they will get it at a particular price. Of course, having met the requirements of quality and so on, based on some kind of a contractual arrangement you would have with the supplier. Yeah. And so therefore, for agriculture to be successful, these two things must be in place. And it therefore calls on our marketing board in that regard to play a different role in the economy in terms of helping our farmers. Can marketing board play the role of being a regular supplier, a regular purchaser of our goods from our cultural farmers by giving them a fixed price, which is encouraging, and two, being that already market that they can actually sell to. Now, most farmers in Grenada wouldn't sell their goods to marketing board. They wouldn't. They prefer to go and stay by the roadside and hustle until the goods is sold when they should really and truly be in the farm, in the garden producing. So that's an issue that we have to address. The link with agriculture and tourism, that again has to be fostered. The link with agriculture and our supermarkets, that has to be fostered. That has to be enabled for agriculture to work in our small island economy. If we enter those things, then we won't get the kind of output that we need from our agriculture sector. I'm referring especially to the cash crop, the young farmers who are more involved in the cash crop production as against the more elderly person who be more involved in the traditional coconut and bananas.
Okay, I would turn to a conversation on the citizenship by investment program here. It is one of the, not short-term, but one of the long-term policy prescriptions of the government. Mr. Diallo, you actually have defended the citizenship by investment program as a sustainable revenue earner for Grenada. What are you hoping to see in the budget with respect to the CBI program? Would it be expanded? What does that look like?
Yeah, well, it is one of the programs that's being looked at in terms of expansion and growth from the point of view that it's a foreign investment program, foreign direct investment, if you want to use those words. It has two major streams, inflow streams, what we call a Section 10, which is monies going to help with infrastructural development in what we call a National Transformation Fund. And of course, you can invest monies in projects, which we call Section 11 of the CBI program, where there's an investment project like a accommodation sector project, and people are invest their funds there, and the government gets the benefit through extra employment and fees and so on. So yes, CBI is going to be looked at as one of the areas that we can use for growth and attracting foreign investment. As Lennox would have mentioned earlier, there is a strain on funds to get funds out of the international community, especially grant funding. And even though you're getting loan and you get them at concessionary rates, government have to manage their debt to GDP ratios. So CBI offers an alternative in that sense, and gives projects the possibility of financing without huge financing costs, and at the same time getting projects on the ground and all that comes with projects. So it is going to be an area that is going to be looked at, and for expansion, CBI has many areas that citizens can get involved in. If you want to put on, let's say, a health and wellness clinic in Grenada, and you want to do it through CBI, it is possible. You go to IDC, and there's a Section 11A that speaks to significant investor and investments, and that area also assists with CBI. So CBI is looking to expand its portfolio and its representation in the country in terms of foreign direct investment that could certainly lead to help in infrastructural developments. I mean, the funds from the NTF are used for a lot of things in Grenada. We have talked about road construction, bridge construction, community centers, and all of those are things that some of the funds from that ICT, agro-processing, if there are areas like that that the government needs to invest in and assist in, these are funds that the government will tap on to also put there. And part of the funds of CBI is also put aside to manage through NTF, manage emergencies. So if there's an emergency in the country, you can use a portion of the funds from the NTF to deal with that. So it has its benefits along those lines. And a lot of emphasis, I suspect, in 2021 and beyond is going to be how we could make the program, more efficient, how we could expand it and get serious benefits to accrue to the country.
Mr. Diallo, what is the current data with respect to revenues collected from the CBI in 2020? Are you privy to that information?
Yes, I am, but I am restricted on what I can say because, we have to present that information to Cabinet and to Parliament before it goes public. What I
Okay.
can tell you is that the CBI program has performed in 2020 better than 2019. So, when we had the financial crisis in 2008, education services weren't affected in any major way, and we saw education services doing very well. In this pandemic, every sector was affected except CBI in any significant way. All we would have seen in CBI is the speed at which applications were coming in was a little bit slowed because of the source countries to get information and to get the relevant compliance checks done. But in terms of volume, that has not decreased. And the unit was able to go digital with part of its platform, so that assisted as well. And as we move forward in 2021, the digitization of the application process is going to be almost 100%. So that is going to help as well in terms of the amount of applications we can receive and process, and also help with expansion.
Mr. Andrew, I'm going to get to you with respect to CBI. Is that a sustainable program for Grenada?
Well, it has been around for a while. Good. It has been around for a while. If it's been around for a while, it suggests that, it could be a good source of income. My concern with the CBI is precisely the National Transformation Fund and the lack of disclosure. What is happening with that fund? Now you put the question to Mr. Diali, and he was very careful in his response to you. Yeah. So I think the government needs to be more open when it comes to the use of those monies. What is being used for? What's the balance? How much money we have there? Yeah, and what is being used for? We don't know, right? Now it's the same thing. It's the same thing as well with the budget. For the last 10 years, when you look at our budget has been lacking an important section. Yeah, a budget has three parts. It has revenue, it has expenditure, and it has financing, which is the third part. When you look at our budget, you don't see a financing section. Now, the financing section is what explains to us whether or not the government is really balancing its budget. Yeah? And one aspect of the financing section is the reserves. Now, over the last 5 years, the last 6 years, in fact, since 2016, our government have been having an overall surplus. What that means? An overall surplus means that your total revenue of current grants and capital grants, your total revenue, has exceeded your total expenditures of recurrent and capital. So you have an overall surplus, which is a rare situation. In 2020, the budget had an overall surplus of $154.8 million. Good. If you present a budget and you don't explain to the nation what is happening to that overall surplus, you are really shortchanging the people in terms of the strength and the validity of the budget that you have presented. Now, in this COVID time, when you have falling revenues on the tax side, on the recurrent side, when you have falling recurrent grants, when you do not know what is happening to the National Transformation Fund, right, in terms of collection, where that money is going, we see what in my opinion, I don't think that expenditures are really falling. I mean, I see a lot of expenditures taking place. Yeah, so I don't think that's been a foreign expenditure. Government has been able to meet all of its recurrent expenditure bills on time, even in this special period. So I ask in this question now, what is happening to the reserves? In fact, I think I remember hearing the Prime Minister say that these days we are utilizing our reserves to meet some of this expenditure. So one of the things I would like to see coming out in this 2021 budget is that section that says, how are we going to balance, how are we going to finance the budget if we have an overall surplus? What will happen to it? Where that money is going? Is it going to meet unpaid claims in the Treasury? Because you do have unpaid claims. And if you have an overall surplus, it means some of that money can be used to cover those claims. Good? Is it going to be put aside for later days? We don't know. I am saying that there are some, as far as the government finances and the financial report and the budget is concerned, there have to be some far more disclosures, yeah, for the people to understand and the people to feel better with, yeah, so that we could know that something good is happening to the economy. But This kind of disclosure, non-disclosure, I think, is very much affecting the psyche of the population, especially in this special period.
Speaking from the lens of a journalist, one of the things that I am also concerned about is the lack of a Freedom of Information Act. Certainly, there has to be some kind of sunshine mechanism in the country where a Freedom of Information Act comes into force, where as a media practitioner, I should be able to access information that is needed by the public. And Mr. Dialli, it is something that I would be advocating for actually in 2021 for the enactment of a Freedom of Information Act. I see you nodding. Would I get some support from you in that respect? Because again, the reason I'm bringing up a Freedom of Information Act is because, again, as Mr. Andrews mentioned, there appears to be a lot of issues with respect to transparency.
I have no difficulty supporting a Freedom of Information Act. I think that when you give people information and people get proper information, they are now able to make a good decision on how they evaluate issues. And the information must be balanced from both sides of the discussion. So would not certainly not oppose that. Of course, with all Freedom of Information Acts, there is the issue of national security and concerns around national security. So there would be issues around that and how we protect that. So I am openly supporting that. I have no issues with that at all. I would just like to go back on a few comments that Lennox made and just say that, I think our government over the years have presented a budget that is not a deficit budget. And that is an important thing. And Lennox knows exactly what I'm talking about. And he spoke about it in the surpluses, which is not something you normally see. And government has to be given some level of commendation for how they have managed the budget process and their revenues and expenditures. That is why our debt to GDP ratios have fallen as it is and continue to be in that direction. But I also want to remind that as part of the Fiscal Management Act and the fiscal responsibility legislation, there are avenues in there and there are force majeure clauses that government can use and apply to suspend certain types of payments, debt being one of them, for example, in issues like a pandemic, and use the monies or the shortfall from that to also finance operational expenditures, recurrent expenditures, as Lennox would have indicated. But I have no issues. I think part of the budget presentation involves another booklet that is called Short-Term to Medium Macroeconomic Presentation. I can't remember the exact term of the booklet, which speaks to which analyzes the risks to the budget, analyzes the risks to revenues, the risks to expenditure, and also how in the short to medium, government plans to continue financing its revenues through the various sectors that they would have highlighted. So I know that some of that information is there. That wasn't there 5 years ago. And with FROC, the Fiscal Responsibility Oversight Committee in place, they do ensure that government meets the mandates of the fiscal responsibility legislation. And that is important because you have a balance and check there to ensure that the government is trying at least to meet its obligations as is required by law. And that helps us to keep things in perspective. So I only add these to say that I think generally we have managed our public finances well in terms of that. However, there's always room for improvement. There's always room to look at things differently. And as we mentioned earlier, COVID certainly has opened our eyes to how we can do better and look internal, as Lennox mentioned, which I think is so important. How could we look internally to see how we could resolve some of the issues that we have had? Or people need to understand that it's now a lot upon them to see how they need to change their attitudes, change the way they work and do things, and see that no, this is now a greater responsibility on us as a people. When we talk government, it is not the politicians. The government is us and the country. And we have to look in the mirror every day and say, what am I getting up today to do differently to help my country and my fellow citizens around me? So it's not just about these politicians that we elect and put in government. You're muted, Kelon.
But no, the point I'm making is, to respond to your comment about government, again, we are supposed to be the bosses of the people in power, right? So it's not only about our personal responsibility, but it's also about ensuring that those in government do the work that they were elected to do.
Correct. And that's why we have the FROC and we have this fiscal responsibility legislation.
All right. Now, folks, I'm going to give you guys the opportunity to part with some final comments as we look forward to the budget presentation on Wednesday. I would start with you, Mr. Andrews.
Yeah, well, I hope that this budget would serve, or it would be not just a budget of numbers, yeah, not just a budget of 1.5 or 1.6 billion dollars to be spent. I hope it will be a budget that would serve as an instrument to motivate, to stimulate, to captivate, to get the people back to work, to change our values, to change the way in which we look at things, to bring us closer together as a nation, as a people, that we all have to work and work hard. I hope that budget will serve as an encouragement, as a drive, as an enthusiasm to bring about a new sense of patriotism and a new sense of dignity in us all. Yeah, so that when that budget is presented, people must get a drive. People must get a vibes that, yeah, with that kind of budget, I will go and work and help to build and help to transform my country and make sure we come out of this serious economic situation in which we find ourselves now, right? So that budget must be a motivator. It has to be a motivator. So it's not just a budget of words and numbers. It has to be a motivator, a stimulator, bringing the nation, working, all of us working for the common good, right? As we may go about seeking our own individual self-interest, but simultaneously doing so, bearing in mind we're looking after the common good of the country.
Certainly, that is a very optimistic tone that you struck there. Mr. Diali?
I share the same views of Lennox. I think a budget is not only about numbers, and I think Lennox have put it aptly, and I don't need to repeat. And I will only add that, at the end of the day, the budget also represents structural issues and what we need to do. I am hoping that agriculture will be more, focused in this budget, and whatever other sectors we have, whether it's ICT or services, and give us the opportunity to grow some sectors. I think the renewable energy sector is a sector that is grossly underlooked in terms of how we can get a lot of businesses into that and retraining of our people. And that is something we need to address. And I hope as we move forward, those are areas that we can look at as a nation and deal with. But Lennox is absolutely correct. It must serve as a motivator as well, and not just only deal with just numbers. And our people needs to be motivated at this time. It provides a psychological boost. And some of us are, those of us without jobs and so on. I could imagine the depression and the psychological issues that these families and people are facing. So we need to provide that hope as well. So I'm hoping that it can do that.
Gentlemen, thank you so much. This has been a very robust, very enlightening and educational conversation today. Certainly, this is what we endeavor to do here at the Bubb Report. It is important that we educate the citizenry. The citizenry has a right to know about their affairs. I would encourage everyone to tune in to the budget, listen to the budget, and see what the budget has with respect to implications for your own lives. Because again, the budget is the people's business. Let me segue into what we'll be doing next week. Next week, we'll have a follow-up budget discussion to analyze and dissect the implications of the 2021 budget as we look forward to what is expected to be a challenging economic forecast for the fiscal year 2021. To our listeners and viewers, we also welcome your suggestions on issues that need to be covered in Grenada and in the diaspora that you, the public, feel are not being adequately covered by media. And you can reach the Bubb Report on WhatsApp at 347-687-3763 or by email at torchlightindependentmedia@gmail.com. Let me thank also finally the hardworking producers of the Bubb Report who do the work of helping me to put this program together every week. And certainly I want to thank them as well. Folks, have a great week and bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Mm-hmm.